After being hit on the head by a book that fell from the sky, a new set of memories suddenly flooded my mind. Because of those memories, my obsession with my first love completely disappeared. When I woke up, I was still a little dazed. I looked around the room. It was luxuriously decorated, with every detail arranged according to my preferences. The new memories were vivid, almost as if heaven itself had planted them there to warn me. If I continued to be stubborn and unrepentant, I'd end up in misery. I pulled back the curtains and saw a vast field of roses. Adrian, my husband, had hired professional gardeners to plant them. Every flower in the garden and every inch of the villa's decor had been designed based on my tastes. But back then, I had seen it all as a beautiful prison. I opened my phone and, unsurprisingly, saw countless messages from my best friend, Rachel. We were supposed to go out 3 days ago, but I was knocked unconscious by the falling book just before leaving, and the plan fell through. Hazel, did Adrian lock you up at home again? He's such a psycho. I'll help you escape for sure. Jack is still waiting for you. I laughed. She called Adrian a psycho, but she had used every trick in the book to seduce him after I left. And Jack, my so-called first love who was supposedly waiting for me? The new memories revealed that he had dated countless women overseas. In those memories, I forced Adrian to divorce me. He was left broken and scarred, but still gave me most of his assets. Sadly, that money was quickly scammed away by Jack. It was only then I realized the truth. Everything had been a lie. I hadn't replied to Rachel for 3 days, and she was clearly getting desperate. Her messages became more manipulative, trying to drive a wedge between Adrian and me. Jack still loves you deeply. Adrian's coming back from abroad in 2 days. If you wait, it'll be too late. Adrian's whereabouts were always confidential. Yet Rachel somehow knew his return date. Clearly, she had planted spies around him. I opened my chat with Adrian. The messages were all from him, sweet greetings, updates on his itinerary, but I had never replied. The latest one was from last night. My flight's been rescheduled. I'll be back today. In the past, that message would have given me a headache. But now, for some reason, I felt an overwhelming longing for him. Okay. I'll wait for you to come back. Be safe. Just after I sent the message, I heard a commotion downstairs. A car had arrived at the estate's entrance. A 5-year-old boy got out, wearing a kindergarten backpack and holding something in his hand. As he entered the estate, everyone he passed greeted him politely. He was our son. He looked almost exactly like Adrian, 80% to be precise. Maybe that was why I had never been able to truly like him. I remembered overhearing him talking to Adrian once. Daddy, am I not being good enough? Why doesn't Mommy like me? Is it because I'm not obedient? Adrian had pulled him into his lap, gently stroking his cheek. Maybe it's because you look too much like Daddy. When I went downstairs, our son had just come inside. His eyes lit up when he saw me, but he hesitated, taking cautious steps toward me. Mommy. His gaze kept scanning me until it locked on the bruise on my forehead. His eyes widened, and he rushed over. Mommy. What happened to your head? I bumped it by accident. Have you been good at kindergarten this week? Seeing how careful and timid he was, I couldn't help but reach out and wipe the sweat from his forehead. He flinched, then nuzzled into my hand, obedient and warm. I was good. I even got a gold star from the teacher. The housekeeper watched nervously, then approached cautiously. Young master, why don't we go play with your toys so Mommy can rest? Our son looked at me, clearly reluctant to leave, but obediently let go of my hand. We had rarely shared moments of affection like this. In the past, my feelings for him were a tangled mess of resentment and guilt. But now, all I wanted was to make it right. Am I not allowed to talk to my own son? I raised an eyebrow at the housekeeper, who instantly backed away. My erratic behavior in the past had clearly made everyone in the villa wary of me. Only my son looked at me in confusion, nervously fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. After a pause, he whispered, Mommy, do you want to see my gold star? I finally noticed the sticker in his hand and nodded. His whole face lit up, and he placed it proudly in my palm. It's beautiful. My baby is so clever. Everyone in the room froze in shock. My son was so excited he couldn't even speak for the rest of the day. He played nearby, not too close but not too far, always glancing at me. Eventually, I couldn't resist and patted my lap. Do you want to sit on Mommy's lap and play? He stood up, hesitated for a moment, then ran over with a huge smile. He settled in my lap, occasionally looking up at my expression while playing. "Mommy, do you want to read a storybook or play with toys?" Behind his well-behaved nature was a desperate longing for maternal love. He had learned to be careful, always fearing he'd upset me. My heart broke. I pulled him close and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. From now on, Mommy will do everything you want to do together." We played all day. By evening, I was unusually tired. I laid down, and the moment my head hit the pillow, I fell asleep. Sometime during the night, I felt a chill. I reached for the blanket, but something restrained my hand. A heavy weight pressed on me. I could barely breathe. Groggily, I opened my eyes and saw almond-shaped eyes gazing into mine. Adrian. He was undeniably handsome, something I had never denied. The first time we met, I even wondered if fox spirits truly existed in this world. "Hazel." His voice was low, husky, magnetic. It stirred something in me. "It's been a while. Did you miss me?" His cold fingers traced my face, sliding down my neck, raising goosebumps. Let go of my hand first. Although Adrian tolerated all my tantrums, breaking glasses, smashing chandeliers, the truth was, the really unstable one in this marriage was him. He was obsessive, suspicious, and extremely possessive. Once, after an argument instigated by Rachel, Adrian locked me inside the villa. "Baby, I don't want to do this either. But if I let you go, who knows where you'll run off to?" His body was always cold. Even now, his touch made me shiver. "I promise I won't run away. But please, it's uncomfortable being tied up." He didn't respond. Only after everything was over did he finally release me, gently massaging my wrists. I opened my eyes and saw Adrian kneeling beside the bed, his eyes full of emotion as he focused on my hands. "What did you want to talk about?" he asked softly. "You messaged me." I was surprised. "Letting you go." "I told you before, I won't agree to that." I was too exhausted to argue. I sat up with my last bit of strength and threw myself into his arms. He froze, clearly shocked, then held me tightly. I fell asleep again in his embrace. The next morning, I heard voices outside the bedroom door. "Is Mommy still not awake?" She promised to eat breakfast with me. "Mommy is very tired. She needs to rest." I peeked through the door and saw our son sitting on the floor. "Then I'll wait right here so she'll see me when she wakes up." He had Adrian's stubbornness, no doubt about it. I called out softly, "Baby." His eyes lit up and he rushed in. "Good morning, Mommy." Yesterday's interaction had broken the wall between us. He grabbed my hands with his tiny ones, full of joy. Adrian stood at the door, watching with a complicated expression. He had tried everything to win me over before, even begging on his knees, but I had only grown colder. Now, he simply stood there awkwardly. The best way to handle awkwardness is with directness. I looked at him and smiled. "Good morning, hubby." Adrian, startled, knocked over 2 glasses of water that morning. By the third time, I laughed. "If you don't like me calling you that, I'll stop." "I do like it." He answered faster than I expected. At the breakfast table, the housekeeper brought our meal. As she placed it down, our eyes met, and she immediately looked away. "Mrs. Wood, how long have you been?" "Mrs. Wood, how long have you been working here?" My sudden question made her stiffen for a second, but she quickly recovered. "Almost 4 years, Mom." 4 years? That meant she had witnessed every tantrum, every glass I smashed, every moment I pushed Adrian away and mistreated our son. And yet she stayed. "I see. Thank you for taking care of the house all this time." Her eyes widened. She probably thought I was preparing to fire her. But instead, I simply offered her a sincere nod and turned my attention back to breakfast. My son beamed as he munched on a buttered croissant, swinging his legs beneath the table. Adrian sat across from me, silent, watching my every movement with cautious curiosity. I could tell he was trying to figure out what had changed. Why I was no longer cold. Why I had called him hubby. Why I had held our son. "You're not eating?" I asked, gesturing to his untouched plate. He blinked, then picked up his fork. I didn't want to break the moment. I smiled faintly. "Break it then. Breakfast is no place for awkward silence." He chuckled, the sound light and unguarded. It was the first time in years that the air between us didn't feel like a battlefield. After breakfast, I went for a walk in the garden with our son. The roses were in full bloom, a sea of scarlet and blush tones stretching to the edge of the estate. I used to resent them, thinking they were a symbol of Adrian's control. Now, I saw something different. Devotion. Patience. Years of silently loving someone who only ever pushed you away. Mommy, can we pick some flowers? Sure, baby. Which color do you like best? Red. Because it looks like superhero capes. I laughed and knelt beside him as he carefully chose the most vibrant blossoms. We made a small bouquet together. When he proudly handed it to me, I felt a tightness in my chest. Thank you, my little hero. He giggled and hugged me tightly. Mommy smells like cookies. I ruffled his hair. Maybe we should bake some this afternoon. Would you like that? Yes, yes. Chocolate chip. His joy was so pure, so untainted. And I had almost lost this because of lies and manipulation. When we returned to the villa, Rachel had messaged me again. Hazel, seriously, what is going on? Are you okay? You're scaring me. Jack wants to know if you got the necklace he sent. Necklace? I scrolled down. A photo was attached. It was a simple heart pendant. I stared at it without emotion. Another message followed. He says it was the same kind you saw at the street fair when you were 19. Do you remember that? Yes, I remembered. But I also remembered the truth now. Jack had bought that same necklace for 3 other girls, one of whom sent me a message in the memories I had received from the falling book. A message with screenshots, receipts, dates. Everything matched. I replied, "Tell Jack to stop living in the past. And Rachel, if you have any decency left, stop trying to ruin my marriage." I hit send and muted her number. Adrian appeared behind me, wiping his hands with a kitchen towel. Is something wrong? Nothing I can't handle. He hesitated, then sat beside me on the couch. Hazel, I know I have no right to ask, but are you? Are you happy here? The question hung in the air. I thought about it. About how I'd once called this villa a cage. About how I blamed Adrian for everything, when in reality, it was Jack who had used me, Rachel who had manipulated me, and myself who had let bitterness blind me. I looked at Adrian. His eyes were clear, waiting without expectation. I'm trying to be. And I think I will be. His hand inched closer on the couch cushion. When our fingers brushed, he froze. I didn't pull away. He slowly intertwined his fingers with mine. That simple gesture made my throat tighten. Thank you, Hazel. For what? For not hating me today. I turned my head to look at him. His expression was heartbreakingly sincere. Adrian, I never really hated you. I just didn't understand you. Or myself. He nodded, lips pressed into a line. That afternoon, I helped our son bake cookies. He got flour everywhere, even on his nose, and I laughed so hard I cried. Adrian took pictures of us, his voice soft as he encouraged our son to smile wider. It was the kind of day I never thought I could have. When evening came, I stood on the balcony watching the sunset. Adrian joined me, handing me a cup of chamomile tea. Do you remember the first time we met? I nodded. Of course. You were standing at the university gate, looking completely out of place in that 3-piece suit. He chuckled. And you asked me if I was lost. And you said, only if you don't help me find what I'm looking for. We both laughed. I was looking for you, Hazel. I just didn't know it yet. The moment stretched between us. Can I show you something? Sure. He led me to the study. On the wall was a huge canvas covered by a white cloth. He pulled it down. It was a painting. Of me. Sitting in the garden, surrounded by roses, sunlight in my hair. Peaceful. Smiling. You painted this? He nodded. Every year, on our anniversary. This one was from last year. I stared at it. I had never looked like that. At least not to myself. But to Adrian, I had. I'm sorry, Adrian. For everything. He stepped closer. You don't have to say that. You were hurting. And I didn't know how to help you. I just didn't want to lose you. I looked into his eyes. You never did. We stood there in silence. Then he reached for me, slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. That night, for the first time, we shared a bed not out of habit, not out of control, but out of choice. The next morning, Rachel was at the gate. She demanded to see me. I stepped outside alone. "You look different," she said. "Do I?" "More alive. More smug." I smiled. "I'm just tired of lies, Rachel." I remember everything now. Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "The book, Rachel. The one you dropped on me. It had everything. The truth. Your manipulations. Jack's lies." She paled. I gave her a warning look. "Leave us alone. I won't say it again." "You think you can threaten me?" "No. I think I can end you, quietly and legally. Stay away from my family." She flinched at the word. "Family." I turned my back and walked away. Inside, Adrian waited, holding a steaming mug in our son's hand. He looked at me like he didn't believe I was real. "Let's go for a drive," I said. He smiled. "Anywhere you want." And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. We drove without a destination in mind. The sun was warm against the windshield, and our son sang quietly in the back seat, his voice soft and off-key, but it made Adrian smile every time he looked in the mirror. I sat beside him in the passenger seat, fingers playing with the window switch, up and down, over and over. I used to feel trapped in this car, in this life, in this marriage. But something had shifted. Or maybe, it had always been like this, and only now did I finally have eyes to see it. "Hazel," Adrian said gently, eyes on the road, "do you remember that little bookstore on Belridge Street?" "Of course. It smelled like cinnamon and ink." "Why?" "You said, if you ever ran away from everything, you would live above a bookstore like that." I did say that, didn't I? I looked out the window, watching the trees blur past. I had meant it back then. I had craved simplicity so badly, I was willing to burn everything to the ground just to feel something real. But now, I had something real. Right here. We drove for hours, eventually ending up at the very bookstore he mentioned. I gasped softly when I saw it. It hadn't changed. The same crooked sign, the same ivy climbing the brick walls. Adrian turned off the engine. "I rented the place," he said quietly. 2 years ago. Just in case." "Just in case of what?" "In case you ever decided to leave. I wanted you to have a place to go." My breath caught. "And you never told me?" "You weren't in a place to hear it then." I stared at him. This man. So calm. So still. So quietly desperate to love me from any distance I allowed. I stepped out of the car, heart heavy, and walked toward the bookstore. He handed me a key. I opened the door. The scent of old paper hit me instantly, just as I remembered. The upstairs room had a little bed, a reading nook, and a small kitchenette. It was perfect. "You built me a home I never asked for," I whispered. "Because I knew you needed one," he replied. We didn't speak after that. Not in words. Our son explored the shelves, pointing out colorful books with dragons and castles and heroes. Adrian and I sat quietly on a creaky wooden bench by the window, watching the world go by. When we returned to the villa that night, the lights were already on. The housekeeper had prepared dinner, and our son ran to the table in excitement. "I need to show you what I drew at the bookstore, Mommy." He proudly held up a picture. It was us. A stick-figure family. One tall man, one long-haired woman, and a smiling little boy. In the sky, above our heads, a book floated with golden rays around it. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the book. "That's the magic book that gave you your smile back." Adrian paused as he served soup into a bowl. I didn't correct our son. Because maybe, just maybe, he was right. That night, after our son fell asleep, I stood on the balcony, lost in thought. Adrian joined me, carrying a blanket which he draped around my shoulders. "Are you cold?" "A little." He nodded. "You used to say the stars looked like escape routes. Little holes in the sky where light could escape." I remember. "And now?" "Now they look like forgiveness." He stood beside me silently. After a long pause, I turned to him. "Why didn't you ever give up on me?" "Because I knew that the Hazel I loved was still in there. Just buried under pain." "And if she never came back?" He looked down, lips pressed together. Then I would have loved you from a distance. Forever, if I had to. My throat tightened. I leaned into his chest. He froze for a moment, then wrapped his arms around me tightly, as if afraid I would vanish again. Adrian, I'm not going anywhere. He didn't reply. He just held me. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found a small envelope on the table. My name was written in Adrian's neat handwriting. Inside was a letter. Hazel. If you are reading this, it means something has changed. Maybe not everything. Maybe not enough. But something. I wanted you to know the truth about a few things. I never blamed you for pushing me away. I always understood you were hurting, and I was part of that hurt. Maybe not directly, but enough. I was the man who loved you in silence when you looked elsewhere. I was the man who watched you chase ghosts. And when you stopped running, I wanted to be here. Still. Waiting. Everything I built, everything I did, every rose in the garden, every gold star in our son's hand, it was all for you. For us. But I never knew if it would be enough. I only hoped. Welcome back, Hazel. Adrian. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it in my drawer like something sacred. Rachel had not messaged again. It seemed she understood now. Or maybe Adrian had made arrangements to silence her influence. Either way, I no longer cared. She had no place in my life anymore. A few days later, we visited the school for a parent-teacher meeting. Our son held both our hands as we walked into the classroom. The teacher smiled warmly. He talks about both of you constantly, she said. Especially Mommy. He says you came back from a dream. In a way, I had. On the drive home, our son fell asleep in the back seat, head tilted, mouth open. Adrian glanced at me. I want us to have more days like this. We will. I promise. At night, I tucked our son into bed. He held onto my fingers tightly. Mommy, will you still be here tomorrow? Yes, baby. I will always be here. Even if the book falls again? I smiled and kissed his forehead. Even then. Adrian stood at the doorway, watching us. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I turned to him. Do you think we can ever be normal? No, he said. But I think we can be better. I laughed softly. That's enough for me. He kissed my forehead and pulled me close. Tomorrow, the world might fall apart again. But tonight, in this small, quiet moment, everything was exactly as it should be. And for the first time in a long time, I closed my eyes and slept without fear, without guilt, and without pain. Just love. The days passed quietly, like water slipping through my fingers. Peaceful. Steady. Fragile. Adrian returned to work, though he made sure to come home early each evening, always with something in hand. A new book for our son, a flower he picked from the garden, a fresh pastry from the bakery downtown. He never came home empty-handed. And I never forgot how, for so long, I turned away each offering with indifference or irritation. Now, I met him at the door. Sometimes with a smile. Sometimes with a kiss. But always, always with open arms. Our son was thriving. I noticed it in small things. He stopped flinching when I raised my voice, though I rarely raised it now. He stopped asking if I would disappear. He started humming again, just little tunes he made up. Sometimes he would sing my name. Hazel, Hazel, Mommy's home, Mommy's here, Mommy stays. It crushed me every time, and still, I smiled. One afternoon, as I stood on the balcony sipping tea, I noticed the housekeeper speaking with someone by the gate. Her posture was stiff, almost defensive. I squinted, heart pounding when I recognized the woman standing there. Rachel. I set down my cup and made my way downstairs. By the time I reached the door, she had already stepped past the threshold. The housekeeper looked to me for direction, eyes wide with concern. It's all right, I said calmly. I'll handle it. Rachel looked thinner. Tired. Her usual smug confidence had faded. She held a folder in her hands. Hazel, You shouldn't be here. I know. But I came to give you this. She held out the folder. What is it? Proof. Of everything. I didn't move to take it. Everything you saw in those memories? I have the originals. Jack, he lied to both of us. And to others too. There were more women. I helped him steal from you, Hazel. I knew what I was doing. I remained silent. There was nothing she could say to erase what had been done. I was jealous, she whispered. Of you. Of Adrian. Of your life, even when you didn't want it. I thought if I helped Jack, I could have what you threw away. You didn't come for forgiveness. She shook her head. No. I came to surrender. She placed the folder on the entry table and stepped back. Adrian already has a legal team watching you. If this is some stunt. It's not. I'm tired of running. She turned to leave. I stopped her. Rachel. She paused, 1 foot outside the door. Don't ever contact me again. But I hope you find peace. Somewhere far from here. She nodded once, and then she was gone. I picked up the folder and brought it inside. When I opened it, my hands trembled. Bank statements. Messages. Photos. Recordings. Jack's scams, his fake investments, the women he conned, the money trails. And at the center of it, a detailed ledger, exactly how much he had stolen from me, from others, and how Rachel helped facilitate it. I took it to Adrian that evening. He read through it all in silence. When he finished, he looked up at me with something unreadable in his eyes. You want justice? I don't know. I just want closure. Then I'll handle it. Adrian made a few calls. He didn't shout. He didn't even raise an eyebrow. But within 2 days, Jack's accounts were frozen, and Rachel's name was flagged on legal registries. Closure was coming. Quietly. Efficiently. Just like Adrian. One evening, I found a small, dusty photo album in the storage room. Curious, I brought it upstairs. Our son crawled into my lap as I flipped through the pages. Who's that? He asked, pointing to a young woman in a graduation gown. That's me. You look different. I smiled faintly. I was different. He turned the page. Daddy. Yes. That was when we first met. You were smiling. I was, wasn't I? We went through the entire album. Weddings. Vacations. Our son's birth. And then. Blank pages. Why did it stop? Because I stopped looking. At what? At life, I suppose. He didn't really understand, but he nodded anyway. Can we take new pictures? We can take as many as you want, sweetheart. The next day, we did just that. Adrian brought home a Polaroid camera, and we took silly pictures in the garden. My son in a superhero cape. Adrian holding a basket of cookies like a proud contestant on a baking show. Me, laughing with flour on my nose. The wall near the staircase slowly filled with memories. New ones. Honest ones. One night, I was startled awake by a nightmare. I sat up, breath shallow. Adrian stirred beside me. Hazel? I had a dream Jack came back. That he was standing in this room, watching me. He reached for me. His hands were warm. Grounding. He can't hurt you. Not anymore. I nodded and leaned into his chest. Do you think people like us can really start over? We already have. I stayed like that for a long time, just listening to his heartbeat. In the following weeks, I started volunteering at a local shelter. Adrian encouraged it, even helped arrange transportation. I wanted to give back. I needed to. Something inside me had cracked open, and I could no longer live a life of quiet luxury without offering something in return. I worked with women rebuilding their lives. Some left abusive marriages. Some were betrayed by family. Some just needed a chance. I listened. I shared my story, not all of it, but enough. I saw them see me, not as someone perfect, but as someone who survived. One woman said, "You don't look like someone who suffered." And I replied, "Pain wears different clothes on all of us." When I came home that night, Adrian had cooked dinner. It wasn't perfect, he burned the rice, but he was beaming with pride anyway. Our son clapped. Daddy made crunchy rice. I smiled as I hugged them both. Crunchy rice never tasted so good. As the days turned to weeks, we grew closer. One night, I asked Adrian a question I had never dared ask before. Why did you stay? He looked up from the book he was reading. Because I made a vow. To love you in sickness and in health. And I meant it. Even when you didn't. I reached for his hand. You carried this marriage alone for a long time. Maybe. But you're carrying it now. That's what matters. The past would never disappear. But it no longer controlled me. It no longer whispered lies in my ear. I had Adrian. I had my son. I had myself again. One evening, as we watched a movie, our son dozed off between us. Adrian turned to me. Hazel, there's something I've been meaning to ask. What is it? Would you marry me again? I blinked. We're already married. I mean, officially. Not just on paper. I want a wedding. I want to stand in front of everyone and say, I choose you. Again. I covered my mouth with my hand. Yes. Of course, yes. He smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the full weight of joy. Real joy. Not fleeting. Not performative. But rooted. Alive. We started planning together. Not a grand wedding. Something small. Something intimate. Something true. I even called my mother. For the first time in years. She cried. We talked. I told her I forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. The week before the wedding, Adrian came home early with a new bouquet of roses. He handed them to me with a note tucked between the petals. The note said only this. Welcome home, Hazel. And for the first time, I believed it with all my heart. The morning of the wedding, the sky was painted in soft pastels, lavender and rose streaks across a pale blue canvas. There was a gentle breeze coming in through the open windows, carrying the scent of the garden roses Adrian had spent years cultivating. It was perfect. Quiet. Sacred. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the simple lace gown I had chosen. Nothing extravagant. Just white, soft fabric that flowed like memory. My son, dressed in a tiny tuxedo, stood at the doorway with a shy smile. Mommy, you look like a fairy. I turned and crouched to his level. And you look like a prince. He giggled, hiding his face in my neck as he hugged me tightly. Are you nervous? A little. But in a good way. He pulled back, eyes wide. Daddy said when you're nervous and happy at the same time, it means something big is happening. He's right. My son looked thoughtful for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded paper heart. I made this. For you. So you can keep it in your hand when you walk. That way you won't be scared. I took it from him, my hands trembling slightly. Thank you, baby. I will keep it with me always. Downstairs, the garden had been transformed. Strings of white lights hung from the trees. A small archway of roses stood at the center, beneath which Adrian waited, looking both nervous and awestruck as guests filled the chairs. It wasn't a large crowd. Just close friends. A few colleagues. Some of the women I had met at the shelter. The housekeeper stood at the back, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. And Rachel was nowhere to be seen. I stepped into the aisle, holding my son's hand. He walked beside me proudly, chest puffed out, like he was the one getting married. As we approached the archway, Adrian's eyes never left mine. There was so much in them. Gratitude. Relief. Devotion. And that familiar ache of love that had never truly faded. When we reached the front, my son handed me off with great ceremony, then rushed to sit in the front row. Adrian took my hands gently. You came back to me. I never should have left. We exchanged vows we had written the night before. His were soft and steady, filled with years of quiet waiting and unconditional love. Mine were raw and honest, filled with apologies, hopes, and the promise of a better future. The officiant smiled as we slid the rings onto each other's fingers. By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Again. Laughter rippled through the garden as Adrian leaned in and kissed me, slow and deep. My son cheered the loudest. After the ceremony, we sat under the rose archway and shared stories with the guests. Some cried. Some laughed. Some just sat quietly, soaking in the warmth of the moment. The housekeeper approached me during the reception. Mrs. Hazel, may I say something? Of course. She hesitated. I've worked here a long time. I've seen this house during its darkest days. But today it feels alive again. Thank you, I said, squeezing her hand. For staying. Even when I made it hard. She smiled and returned to the kitchen, where trays of cupcakes and sparkling juice awaited. Later, Adrian pulled me aside. There's something I want to show you. He led me to the study, where a large canvas was covered with a cloth. Another painting? He nodded. This one is different. He removed the cloth. It was me, but not in the garden. This time, I was holding our son, laughing, surrounded by roses in full bloom. And beside me, Adrian stood, watching with a soft smile. It's beautiful, I whispered. It's real, he said. That night, we didn't throw a party. No champagne. No speeches. Just the three of us, curled up on the living room floor with popcorn and an old animated movie playing softly on the TV. My son fell asleep between us, head resting on Adrian's lap, legs across mine. Adrian ran his fingers through our son's hair. I was scared, you know. Of what? That you'd wake up from the book's memories and leave anyway. I looked at him, the flickering light from the screen casting shadows on his face. But I didn't. I chose to stay. You chose us. I reached for his hand. And I'll keep choosing you. The days after the wedding were calm. Peaceful. For the first time in years, I felt grounded. I spent time painting again. I started baking with my son every Sunday. Adrian worked fewer hours, delegating more responsibilities. He was learning to slow down, and I was learning to live. But one morning, as I checked the mailbox at the front gate, I found a small package addressed to me. No return name. Just an international stamp. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter. And a flash drive. My hands trembled. I took it to Adrian immediately. We sat down together in the study and inserted the drive into the laptop. A video began to play. Jack. He sat in a dim room, unshaven, eyes red, shoulders hunched. Hazel, if you're seeing this, then you've probably already destroyed everything I worked for. Congratulations. I underestimated you. Again. He laughed bitterly. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to care. But I wanted to say this before everything ends. You were the only person who ever really believed in me. And I used that belief to feed my greed. I wanted to hurt Adrian. I wanted to win. But you weren't a game. There was a long pause. I lost everything. My money. My freedom. Rachel turned herself in. I think she regrets it all. Or maybe she just regrets getting caught. Another pause. I don't know how much longer I have. This isn't a threat. It's a goodbye. The video ended. Adrian closed the laptop without a word. Do you think he's serious? Does it matter? I suppose not. I handed him the letter. He opened it and read silently. It was short. Tell her I'm sorry. And that she deserves the life I could never give. Adrian folded the letter and tossed it into the fireplace. He doesn't get to exist in our life anymore. Agreed. We never spoke of it again. A few weeks later, I received a message from one of the shelter coordinators. One of the women I had mentored wanted me to attend her graduation ceremony. She had completed a nursing program. I showed the message to Adrian. You should go, he said. Come with me? He smiled. Always. The ceremony was simple but moving. When my mentee saw me in the audience, she burst into tears. Afterward, she hugged me tightly. You helped me believe I wasn't broken. You never were, I replied. On the drive home, Adrian was quiet. What are you thinking about? I asked. About how many lives you'll change just by being yourself. I looked out the window, at the road unfolding ahead. Maybe I needed to be broken to learn how to help others heal. Or maybe you were never broken. Just lost. I reached for his hand. Not anymore. Not ever again. We returned home to find our son had built a castle in the living room using couch cushions and bed sheets. He popped his head out. Welcome to the kingdom of cookies. Password, please. I grinned. Love. He squealed with delight and let us inside. That night, as I tucked him in, he whispered, Mommy, this is the best day ever. I kissed his forehead. Every day is the best day when I'm with you. And I meant it. It was a Wednesday afternoon when the storm came. Not the kind that darkens skies or rattles windows, but the kind that begins with a phone call you never expect to receive. I was in the garden, trimming back some of the older rose stems with my son playing nearby, when the housekeeper called out from the veranda. "Mrs. Hazel, it's for you. Mr. Jensen." He said it's urgent. "Mr. Jensen?" "Adrian's lawyer." I wiped my hands and picked up the cordless phone, heart already sinking. "Hazel," he began without pleasantries. "I'm sorry to call like this, but Adrian was in an accident." The world stopped. "He's stable. He's alive. But it was serious. He's at the University Medical Center." I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember telling the housekeeper to watch our son. I only remember the drive, how I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, how every red light felt like a betrayal, how every honk sounded like an alarm bell. When I reached the hospital, I was led to the ICU waiting room. Cold walls. Harsh lights. The smell of antiseptic. Adrian had been in a car crash. A truck ran a red light and struck his vehicle at an intersection. The driver was drunk. He had been conscious when the ambulance arrived, they said. He even asked the paramedics to make sure someone called his wife. When I was finally allowed into the room, I found him hooked to machines. Tubes in his arm. A bandage around his head. Bruises blooming along his jaw. I sat beside him, taking his hand carefully in mine. "You promised me forever, remember?" His eyelids fluttered. "Hazel? I'm here." He tried to smile, but it hurt too much. "You came fast." "Of course I did." He squeezed my hand weakly. "Our son. He's safe. He's home." He sighed in relief and drifted back to sleep. The days blurred after that. I stayed at the hospital, sleeping in the stiff chair beside his bed. Our son visited in the afternoons, carrying drawings and stories and small toys to cheer up his dad. One afternoon, he placed a plastic dinosaur on Adrian's nightstand. "This one is strong like you. So he'll protect you while you sleep." Adrian was slowly improving, but his recovery would take time. The doctors said he had a concussion, cracked ribs, and a fractured arm. But he was alive. And he remembered me. And that was enough. Back at the villa, the silence was heavier than usual. The bed felt too big. The house too quiet. Our son asked each night if Daddy would still remember him in the morning. Every time, I said yes. And every morning, Adrian asked for us by name. It was 2 weeks before he was discharged. I brought him home in the same car that had once carried us to the bookstore. The first place I had ever believed he saw the real me. Now I was the one watching over him. At home, I fluffed the pillows on the couch and helped him lie down gently. Our son snuggled up beside him immediately, resting his head on Adrian's uninjured arm. We watched old movies and took turns reading to him. Adrian joked that being pampered felt strange, but I could see how deeply he appreciated it. Late one night, after our son had gone to bed, I sat beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. "Hazel," he said softly, not looking at me. "Yes?" "If things had gone differently. If I didn't make it. I wanted you to know something." I placed a finger on his lips. "No what ifs. You're here. That's what matters." He closed his eyes, and I saw a tear slide down his cheek. "You stayed." "Of course I did. You always could have left." "I never will." He turned his head and looked at me. The pain medicine made his eyes glassy, but the emotion was clear. "I love you more than I know how to say." "You already say it. Every day." His lips curved upward. After a few weeks, he started to walk short distances again. Our son became his biggest cheerleader, clapping for every step, awarding invisible medals for each victory. "You're my superhero, Daddy." Adrian laughed softly. "Only because I have the 2 best sidekicks in the world." One evening, we sat in the garden again. The roses were in full bloom. I had tea. Adrian had juice. Our son was chasing butterflies. Adrian reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "What's that?" "A gift I meant to give you at the wedding. But I forgot." I raised an eyebrow. "You forgot?" He smiled sheepishly. I was nervous. I opened the box. Inside was a thin silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like an open book. "Because everything changed the day the book fell," he said. I slipped it onto my wrist and held his hand tightly. "Thank you." "No, Hazel. Thank you." For staying. For choosing us. For giving me back my family. I leaned into his shoulder, careful of his healing ribs. For the rest of the evening, we sat in silence, watching the sun dip below the trees. That night, as I tucked our son into bed, he asked a question I hadn't expected. Mommy, will we still love each other when I grow up? Of course. Even when I'm big like Daddy? Even then. What about when you and Daddy get old? We'll still love you. Always. He looked relieved, then closed his eyes. I stayed a little longer, brushing his hair back from his forehead. When I returned to our bedroom, Adrian was asleep, one hand resting on my pillow as if waiting for me. I lay beside him, watching the moonlight cast silver stripes across the room. So much had changed. I had changed. And though the scars were still there, on my heart, in my memories, I no longer ran from them. They were part of me. But they no longer defined me. Adrian stirred in his sleep and reached for me. I let him. In the quiet of that room, with the weight of his hand over mine and the sound of our son breathing down the hall, I realized something simple and profound. The happiest endings aren't perfect. They are just real. Spring turned to summer. The days grew longer, golden light filtering through the villa's windows like a quiet blessing. Adrian was almost fully recovered now. He had returned to work part-time, though he still walked with a slight limp when he was tired. Our son was thriving, more talkative, more confident, and undeniably attached to both of us. The three of us had formed something sacred, something solid. A new rhythm. A real family. One morning, as I was watering the roses, I heard a knock at the front gate. The housekeeper opened it, then turned to me with a confused expression. There's a woman here asking for you, Mrs. Hazel. She says she's your aunt. I froze. My mother had cut ties with most of the extended family years ago, and I hadn't spoken to any of them in nearly a decade. I wiped my hands and walked slowly toward the entrance. The woman standing there was older, with gray streaks in her hair and a worried crease between her brows. Hazel? She asked softly. Aunt Marianne? She nodded. I didn't expect you to recognize me. I hadn't. But I remembered her voice. She used to braid my hair when I was little, humming old lullabies. She was the only one who ever defended me when my mother was cruel. What are you doing here? Can I come in? Just for a moment? I hesitated, then nodded. We sat in the garden, surrounded by roses. Adrian came outside for a moment, saw us, and quietly went back in, giving us space. I found out what happened with Jack, she said. And with Rachel. Word spreads fast in our family, especially when there's shame involved. I didn't reply. She looked down at her hands. Hazel, I came to say something I should have said a long time ago. She took a deep breath. I knew what your mother was like. We all did. But I didn't speak up. I was afraid of her. Of what she would do. And you paid the price. You were just a child. And we let you carry all of her pain. I swallowed hard. Why now? Because I heard you built something beautiful here. And because you deserve to hear someone say it out loud. You did not deserve what happened to you. My hands shook slightly as I reached for my tea. I appreciate you saying that. I do. But it doesn't change anything. No, she said. But it might change something inside you. I sat there in silence, letting her words settle like dust. Before she left, she gave me an old photograph. It was of my mother, holding me as a baby. For once, she looked soft. Gentle. I didn't cry. I just nodded and slipped the photo into my pocket. Later that night, I told Adrian what happened. Do you feel lighter? He asked. I don't know yet. But I feel less alone. That weekend, Adrian surprised me with a short trip to the lake. Just the three of us. A small cottage nestled in the hills, with a wooden dock and a rowboat tied loosely to a post. It was the first time I had been away from the villa in months. Our son squealed when he saw the water. Do fish live in there? Lots of fish, Adrian said. Even sharks? Only friendly ones, I added. We spent the weekend fishing, reading books by the fire, and eating meals we cooked together in a tiny kitchen. One night, we lay on the dock, looking at the stars. Mommy, are there really people on other planets? Maybe. The universe is very big. Do you think they have cookies there? Adrian laughed. If they're lucky, maybe. And do you think they have families like ours? I hope so, I whispered. Because they would be lucky, too. On the last night, after our son was asleep, I stood on the dock, looking at the moon's reflection. Adrian came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You okay? Yes. Just taking it in. He kissed the top of my head. I had a nightmare the other night, I said. That the book fell again. That it erased these memories and gave me another set. One where I left you. One where I never met our son. He was quiet for a long moment. And what did you do? I woke up and held both of you so tight I thought I'd never let go. He tightened his arms around me. You don't need a book to tell you what matters anymore. I turned to face him. I know. When we returned home, there was a letter waiting for me. From Jack's sister. Hazel. I debated whether or not to send this. But in the end, I thought you deserved to know. Jack died last week. Liver failure. He never sought treatment. He never asked for help. He kept a journal. I wasn't going to read it, but in the end, I did. Your name was on almost every page. Sometimes with regret. Sometimes with anger. But always with longing. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I just wanted you to know he wasn't indifferent. He knew what he lost. And it haunted him. I folded the letter slowly. Adrian walked in a few minutes later and saw it in my hands. Bad news? No. Just final news. I burned the letter in the fireplace that night. Not out of rage, but as a symbol. The end of that chapter. A page turned, never to be reopened. Life returned to its rhythm. I continued my work at the shelter. Adrian took on more projects, often consulting from home. Our son started learning piano. The house filled with music, awkward, clumsy, beautiful music. One afternoon, he played a little melody and said, I made this for you, Mommy. What's it called? Hazel's Hope. I cried in front of him for the first time. Not from pain, but from overwhelming, uncontainable love. The seasons began to shift again. Summer gave way to crisp winds and falling leaves. The villa's roses began to fade, preparing for rest. I stood in the garden, touching one of the petals gently. Adrian walked up behind me. Do you know what I see when I look at you now? What? Peace. And fire. At the same time. You're stronger than you know, Hazel. I turned to him. We're stronger together. We both looked at our son, who was pretending to fight imaginary dragons near the fountain. This is what the book gave me, I said. Not memories. Not warnings. A second chance. And I took it. This time, with both hands. The first snow arrived quietly, overnight. When I opened the curtains that morning, the world outside was blanketed in soft white. The roses were gone, buried beneath the cold. The garden was still. Silent. Peaceful. Adrian came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. Our son stood at the doorway in his pajamas, gasping with wide eyes. It's snowing. It's snowing, Mommy. I smiled. Looks like winter finally found us. Can we build a snowman? Please. Adrian ruffled his hair. After breakfast. We'll build the biggest snowman in the neighborhood. Our son raced to the kitchen to get started on his cereal, already planning his snowman's hat and scarf. I stayed by the window, watching the flakes drift down. So much had changed in 1 year. Too much to measure in days or distance. There were no more messages from Rachel. No more shadows from Jack. My family, scattered and silent for so long, had begun to reconnect one letter at a time. Aunt Marianne visited us once a month. Even my mother had sent a brief message through her, just 2 lines. I don't expect anything. But I am glad you are safe. I hadn't replied. Not yet. But I didn't burn the note either. I tucked it into a drawer beside the old photograph of her holding me. Some wounds need time, not salt. That afternoon, we played in the snow. I hadn't laughed like that in years. Our son ran around us, red-cheeked, his scarf flying behind him like a cape. Adrian made a snow angel and pretended he was stuck, calling for backup. I collapsed beside him, breathless from laughter, and kissed his cheek. Look at us, I whispered. We're ridiculous. He looked up at the sky. We're happy. And we were. Later that evening, I sat by the fireplace with a journal in my lap. Adrian had bought it for me weeks ago, telling me I needed to start writing my own story. I opened the first page. My name is Hazel. I once believed I was trapped. In a marriage. In a house. In a life I never chose. But the truth is, I had built most of those walls myself. It took a falling book, one moment of absurd magic, for me to see the truth I had always refused to face. Adrian was never the prison. My own pain was. I looked up from the page. Adrian sat across from me, reading, glasses sliding down his nose. Our son slept nearby, curled on the rug in a nest of blankets and stuffed animals. I returned to the page. This is not a story about regret. It is a story about returning. To love. To self. To family. The journal filled slowly over the following weeks. Pages of thoughts, memories, reflections. I began writing about the women at the shelter too, their triumphs, their grief, their strength. Eventually, someone from the shelter asked if I'd consider reading my words aloud at an event. I did. My hands shook the entire time, but I read every word. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone stood. Then another. Until they all applauded. It wasn't for the writing. It was for the truth inside it. Afterward, a young woman approached me, eyes brimming with tears. I was about to go back to him, she said. But I heard your story. And now I won't. I hugged her, and we cried together. Back at home, Adrian kissed my forehead and told me he was proud. You're helping people find their voice, Hazel. So are you? He smiled. I just built a stage. The months passed. Our son turned 6 and requested a superhero cake with extra sprinkles. He invited the entire class and insisted Adrian and I both dress up as sidekicks. We did. On his birthday, as he blew out the candles, he said, I wish for things to stay like this forever. Adrian looked at me, and I nodded. Me too. As spring returned, so did the roses. One morning, I walked outside and found the first bloom, a single white rose rising from the bed of green leaves. I picked it gently and brought it inside, placing it in a glass of water on the windowsill. Later that day, our son asked why I chose that one. Because it reminds me that beauty always returns. Even after everything dies back. Even after the cold. That evening, we sat in the garden, surrounded by new life. The sun was setting, casting gold across the sky. Adrian took my hand. What are you thinking about? The book. The one that fell? Yes. I still don't know where it came from or why. But I've stopped questioning it. It gave you back to me. It gave me back to myself. He looked at me seriously. Would you want it to fall again? I paused. No. I wouldn't change anything now. Not a single day. He nodded. Me neither. We stayed there until the stars came out. And in the quiet, with the wind rustling the roses and our son laughing in the distance, I closed my eyes and whispered to the night. Thank you. Thank you for the second chance. Thank you for the storm that shook me awake. Thank you for the man who waited. Thank you for the boy who taught me how to love without fear. Thank you for the life I almost lost. And thank you for the story that was mine all along. Not a fairy tale. But something better. Something true.